Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October edition of the French Cinémathèque, which is a collaboration between the Federation of Alliance Française USA and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and director of telescopefilm.com, a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We are delighted to be collaborating with AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here's a short video. I'll put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month. So next month, we'll meet on Monday, November 24th. We'll be talking about the story of Suleiman, which I have to say is one of my favorite French films from the past year, for the way that it manages to be both an intimate social issues drama and a high stakes thriller at the same time. If you haven't seen it before, you are really in for a treat. But this month, given that we are meeting just a few days before Halloween, we chose the psychological horror thriller, Les Diaboliques, also our first archival film, and I hope you enjoyed that change of pace. Before we get started, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen in the reaction section, or put your question in the chat. If there are technical issues, you may want to leave the Zoom, then sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I'd like to introduce our facilitator, who is also the chief film critic for Variety, Peter Debruge, joining us from South America. Over to you, Peter.
That's right. I'm in Sao Paulo for the moment, but I love this discussion group. I'm glad to see familiar faces, and I always love it when we've got new participants. Welcome, everybody. We're trying something different, obviously, with this month's selection. You may have noticed that it was not made in the last 12 months or 2 years, but we've dipped into classic cinema, which is something we've been talking about doing and might try occasionally in the future, depending on kind of how people feel about today's discussion. We'd started out kind of brainstorming this, what October might bring in terms of Halloween adjacent things. And as regulars know, we always do our discussions on the fourth Monday of the month, and that puts us so close to Halloween. We thought, what's a good Halloween thing? And the truth is, all the new kind of thrillers, slashers, genre films out of France right now kind of disappoint me. They're either too gory or they don't quite work, and so that gave us this opportunity to dip in and revisit, or maybe for some of you see for the first time, a real classic by Henri-Georges Clouzot, who has been many times compared to Alfred Hitchcock. And it's probably quite evident to you why that might be seen. What's kind of a fun fact about this film is that both Hitchcock and Clouzot were interested in adapting the book. Most of Hitchcock's films come from novels, and Psycho itself, and many of them he would option the something where he saw potential and things might change quite a lot. Here, Clouzot beat him to it. It's a French novel to begin with. His wife, who I believe it was his wife, who stars in the film, Vera, was the one who'd read it first and kind of passed it along to him. And he, as soon as he read it, like the next day, he snapped up the rights, much to Hitchcock's consternation. I love the idea of this kind of French-American tug of war going on. And also, there's affinities between the two directors' sensibilities, but you might also be thinking, as we talk about these things, what would Alfred do? Or, how some of the things are different because it remains a French story and is allowed to, I think, be somewhat more ahead of its time in terms of some of the gender dynamics. So what I've really enjoyed in recent discussions with this group is kind of opening it up early. And, I can, of course, it can always fall back to me and I can kind of prompt people, but I like when it kind of becomes a group discussion and we kind of are playing off of one another's responses. So in this case, because I know we're dealing with real Francophiles, real cinephiles, I am curious, kind of who among you, if you're, well, we're not all on camera, but I was kind of wanting to gauge who was seeing it for the first time, kind of coming into today's session. Oh, good. I love that. I love that we've given, kind of motivated you to discover this movie. I'd love to hear, maybe just as we start off, a couple first impressions from people who were discovering this movie, which I think has some of the creepiest moments in thriller history, and also one of the great twist endings of all time, one of the earliest twist endings, really, too. Who wants to sort of share a first impression? You can raise your hand. Alan, I'll let you do it. You can also do your raising your hand virtually. If you see that people are stacking up, you can do that and it'll kind of queue at the top so we'll know who to call on next. So Alan, if you want to unmute and tell us kind of what your first impression of Les Diaboliques might have been.
Yes, Peter, I just have a question. What was the connection of the...
Alan, I think you're kind of quiet. Your sound is low.
Can you hear me now?
It's
yes.
a little low, but I'm not. But we can hear you.
Better closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
What is
We'll lean in.
I was just curious. What is the connection with Venezuela that they chose that character to be from Venezuela, the actress?
I don't know the answer to that. Which character are you talking about? The
one of the teachers, one of the owner of the school.
I don't know. Does anyone have an insight into that?
Could you?
I thought it was Vera. Vera.
The Vera character is from Venezuela. I don't remember picking up on that.
Yeah, she's speaking Spanish at one point to one of the kids.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And I know that the novel went through a pretty radical overhaul. I think the dynamics, someone's unmuted. I think that it was more of a lesbian story that's disrupted, and here it's changed so that it's a marriage that's kind of where the two women are conspiring, but not in a sexual or romantic way. They have this other kind of bond. But Alan, I don't know the answer to that. It's worth maybe me doing some research. But now I think it's quite obvious when you have Simone Signoret, who is one of the great actresses of all time, and certainly of the French cinema, and who was married at the time to Yves Montand. Yves had been a star in Wages of Fear, which Clouzot had made, just prior. And he'd, both couples, Vera and Henri Georges and Yves and Simone, had, become quite friendly. And so in this film, he's casting the wife. But in comparison to Simone Signoret, Vera is no actress at all. In some ways, I think her limitations work to the character's advantage, this kind of woodenness almost that she has. But I wouldn't be surprised if any choices that might have been made were to kind of give a bit more of an advantage to Vera. Maybe it covers for, lack of strength in speaking French. I don't know what it would be, or maybe maybe Vera herself has some sort of background like that. But I suspect that it's probably, to kind of put his wife in the best possible light. Okay, Helen, you're next, kind of with your hand up. Tell us what you thought.
Well, the tight, perfect construction, which is like Hitchcock. Nothing is wasted. Everything is focused and, yeah, a certain perfection in structure.
Yeah, there's a real economy to everything. And there are even places where things start to slow down, but it's part of the suspense. It's not, it's never kind of a tangent or anything like that. But that's certainly a similarity, I think, that you'll find between Clouseau and Hitchcock, where they both are, really in service of the narrative and of the kind of tension. Anthony, go ahead.
I want to agree that I thought that the screenplay was tightly written. The acting was really spectacular, and that's despite the fact that the pace was very slow. So despite it being very slow, it was really tightly done. I did not find myself drifting off. I actually was paying attention the whole time.
And that slowness, I'm inclined to think is, reflective of the time. It's not that it's, slow the way that an Andrei Tarkovsky movie is, but rather it's slow that the way that any movie from the mid 50s would be relative to kind of today. Someone, Carol in the chat had the answer for us, Alan. It's that Vera herself was from Brazil. So I think that, the character has been written to explain probably what sounds like Hispanic or Portuguese accent. I'm curious to also know, I think of this movie a little bit like this movie does for like bathtubs, I guess, what like Jaws does for the ocean in a way. I mean, it's or probably a better comparison for what like Psycho does for showers, right? It's and of course Psycho is kind of Hitchcock's, not revenge, but it's his attempt to sort of make a movie like this. So he, that comes out 5 years later, and if he wasn't successful in getting the option for this, that's kind of the direction he was going in. But one of the things I find really interesting about this movie is it has us rooting for the murderers. And I'm curious if people have thoughts on that, whether they're moral thoughts, whether it's kind of how you felt about Paul Maurice's character. Does he deserve it? But when you're putting us kind of on the same side as people who are taking such an extreme plan, that's a pretty big gamble, and it's certainly something that we didn't see happening in Hollywood at the time, where you have a very strict kind of production code, telling us how criminals should be punished, how things have to kind of resolve. Does anyone sort of have thoughts on the husband and kind of like how he made you feel, or was anyone sympathetic toward him? Does anyone want to marry Paul Maurice after this? Yves Montand maybe, but Helen, go ahead.
Well, I thought it characterizing how mean and unappealing he was at the beginning was almost a little heavy-handed. I thought,
like, they have to push you to sort of he has to be so diabolical.
He was really, really bad at the beginning, almost too much.
I mean, it's interesting how much earlier this movie was to, like, in the 80s and 90s, this became a genre of the kind of, sleeping with the enemy, or enough. The Jennifer Lopez movie where she has an abusive husband. Someone just mentioned in the chat a Farrah Fawcett movie that I don't know called The Burning Bed, where like, it almost, there's a very domestic focus of kind of how to deal with, a husband and how extreme people might go. I'm reminded it's another bathtub movie, for those of you who remember What Lies Beneath, with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. And what's interesting about that movie is like we all love Harrison Ford as an actor, and in that film he's basically playing a bad guy. And so it's also something. It's not about conspiring to kill him, but there are definitely echoes and similarities there, because he's trying to convince his wife something being haunted. I don't remember the plot exactly, and she's ultimately aided by ghosts, I think. Someone else he's murdered in the past or something along those lines. But there's a way in which this movie becomes the template or the blueprint, I think, for an entire kind of genre of thriller, and for thrillers in general. Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliantly done. He was Mr. Domestic Abuse, who is a despicable character in the beginning. He even gave his mistress a black eye in the beginning, and that's what made the end so much more brilliant, because she ended up being his ally, and that was
like
all just presumably put up, for the to gain the sympathy of Vera. Right. No, he was definitely intended to be the bad guy, and it was brilliantly done.
Like, how bad a guy do you have to be that both your wife and your mistress want you dealt with? Now, of course, that's not the way at the end we understand that the dynamic is different from that, but the premise has to be that this guy, it's one thing to sort of it's not so hard to believe, I should say, to imagine an unfaithful husband treating his wife badly. But when it also applies to the woman he's presumably wooing now. Brenda, go ahead.
I saw this film maybe 20-25 years ago, and so watching it again was with different eyes, more mature eyes, and I had not noticed 25 years ago how much the husband, I can't remember what the character's name is, and Nicole, how they infantilize her.
Right.
Treat her very much like a child, and she regresses to that kind of behavior at times. But then you can see moments where she is rebelling against her husband, at least. For example, when he came to Nicole's apartment, and of course they want him to drink something, and she's having second thoughts and tries to stop him. And then he hits her, and then she's like, yes, drink up, drink some more.
Right. It is a moment that you might find sympathy for him, or want them to back out. He kind of pushes it on farther.
The other time I see her rebelling is when the children are at stake.
Yeah.
When they are being mistreated or not given enough food, for example, that she has a hard time tolerating, and then she seems to get some, I don't want to say backbone, but speaks up.
Yeah. I mean, she's a really interesting character, because this is a conspiracy between the two women, but she also goes off for a good segment of the film and kind of is the one we're focused on when she goes to the hotel room, when she's meeting with the private investigator. So it's clear that of the two women, she's the one we're aligned with. Suzette, go ahead. You're muted.
I'm here. Muted.
Got it.
She's working on it. Okay.
There we go. Sorry. But like you, I had seen the movie maybe 20-25 years ago. And so I generally knew the plot, but some of the details just popped out this time and were amazing. And like you said, it's very French in that the wife and the mistress have this unusual bond, this unusual friendship, and they work in the same place. And I thought that just wouldn't fly in the United States, that's not how you'd see them. And that there probably is sort of a latent, veiled, sexual interest they had in each other, perhaps. I don't know. Or if it was faked by the mistress so she could gain, the help of the wife. But I did feel that tension when they might get discovered, like that whole scene where they were putting the body in the basket in the trunk of the car and everybody's going to help them and all those things. And I really was rooting for them to get through. I mean, I knew the ending, but I still like rooting for them to get through that situation. Again, it is a brilliant film. I have to add my 2 cents here is that one of my top 5 movies in the whole world is The Wages of Fear. And if you want suspense and tension and on the, literally popcorn seat of, edge of your seat kind of a thriller, that's the movie I always go to when I need that fix. So
I was happy to notice that The Wages of Fear is actually streaming all over the place. So I put a link in the chat in case anybody would like to see it.
Oh, it's on my shelf.
Okay.
But it's worth, if you haven't seen that film and if you, kind of liked what you got here with Diabolique, it's definitely worth kind of exploring more of Clouzot's filmography. He made quite a, number of different films. I've been meaning for years to watch La Vérité with Brigitte Bardot, because I can't recommend it or not, but that's one that's, kind of highly regarded that comes later in his career. Of course, Quai des Orfèvres also, but Wages of Fear, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, is like these men who kind of are tasked with transporting, is it nitroglycerin or dynamite?
Dynamite or something, yeah.
Yeah, explosive
Over this
material.
mountain pass. I mean, just this horrible route they have to go through, and it's
just like a sustained heart attack, a little bit like a Safdie brothers movie. You're like for 2 hours, kind of like having a chest pains, but it's very effective. And the characters, I think the thing that he's so good about, and I don't know if I should keep comparing him to Hitchcock. We don't have to put them in contest, but like what Clouzot's so good about is character. Like the idea that I think this movie is so effective because it has these 3 principal characters and are so dimensional. I think the detective has enough of a kind of dimension. He's kind of a proto Columbo type, a kind of bumbling, shuffling, elderly, retired cop who is much smarter, it turns out, than he might come across at first. But the way that we kind of understand these people in a 3-dimensional way makes the whole thing I think that much more effective. It's funny, I had seen this movie years and years ago, and rewatching it for this, I always remember the ending, specifically that image that's so hard to get out of your head once you've seen it, of what looks like a drowned corpse rising from the bathtub. I mean, that's something, there are these movies like Carrie, Drenched in Blood, in Brian De Palma's film. Like there are movies from horror films that are images, I should say, from horror films that just imprint themselves on you for life. But I hadn't entirely remembered the nuances, the mechanics of kind of how we got there. And so like there is a part of me rediscovering that, Maureen, go ahead.
Thank you. So there was one thing I was going to mention, and you beat me to it. It reminded me of Peter Falk of Columbo. It's like he looks so innocent, and almost people dismiss him, and yet you could see you can almost see it through his expressions. His mind is like trying to put together this puzzle. What I thought was interesting, and I don't know if it harks back to his investigation when he do you remember the renter? They were behind on their rent. and remember that they hadn't paid their rent, and he was listening to the radio. This was like in the beginning, and he's making notations about the water running, and he's marking down. He's being very specific and writing down the time, and it's running and running and then the following morning he listens that the tub is draining, and he's making these annotating these, and I think, I said, there's got to be something significant about the fact that he's so meticulous about keeping track of the time. And perhaps this retired investigator did go back to the apartment, and who knows, might have interviewed them and saying, you know, is that kind of odd? There was something to do with the water, because he kept looking also when he went to look at the boarding school. He also looked at the swimming pool, the fact that it was empty. So I think there had to be some link to water and the timing and all that. It never came up in the thing, but I think might have been part and parcel of his investigation that we'll never know. And the other thing that was interesting is when he was in the room at the boarding school, and he takes this box and he takes out a photo from the mantle, and he puts this in the box with all the directors, the directeur, all his papers. And I'm wondering if he might have found maybe some secret love letters from a typewriter or something. But remember, he took the box with him, and there was like a stack of paper, and then he put the photo that he saw on the mantle on top of the box. So I thought, you know, maybe that was another thing of his meticulous gathering of clues, or that ultimately he kind of suspected the both of them were colluding on this you know, murdering his wife.
Right.
That's all I have to say. Yeah.
I think you're touching on a few really interesting things. I have some answers, but because a couple people have raised their hands, instead of immediately imposing my response, I'm going to see what Helen and Stephen have to say, and then we can circle back with some of the questions. But your line, like, there's something to do with the water, could be almost like the tagline for this movie, right? Like, you've got bathtubs and swimming pools and puddles and you know, kind of pipes and all this kind of stuff. So there's definitely a motif going on. Helen, go ahead.
Well, there's also a very ironic and humorous view of money and finances and stinginess. You know, it's very, it's universal, but it seems very French approach to money, about yeah, the importance of it and how one can be clever with it and hide things, and or yeah, I think it's almost ironic. It's satirical view of
Right.
of how the French are about money.
And is that also the comment you wanted to make, or do you want to add something
because
additional? Okay.
In relation to the taking down
The
of how
water
much
question.
water and
Yeah.
how that's going to affect them in their rent. And
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out that you know, French utilities, even American utilities, like, you know, the whole I'm not, you know, old enough to remember this myself, but the whole like feed the meter kind of thing of, like, you know, paying your gas in a device that's there in your home, or having these things cut off, you know, all of those are part of the thing. But I think the important thing is, long before water becomes a murder weapon, it's being introduced as a kind of element of the film, and it's revealing that character. You know, it's revealing his someone said stinginess, I think, you know, like, he's this ultra controlling person, which makes sense for a headmaster to have an aspect of that, but it extends to his marriage, it extends to his private life, you know. Stephen, go ahead.
The ending. Did
Yes.
she or did she not have a heart attack? The little boy says that he saw her. So there's an ambiguity. Is she dead or is she alive?
I
It's
take that.
really resolved.
She's not
Well, I
dead.
think it's.
No.
You say, Yvonne. You
I
tell
said
us why
she's
you
not
think so.
dead.
Okay.
She's,
I'm
what did
curious
you
why you
say?
think so, because I'm convinced the opposite, but I'm not sure that I'm right.
What did Yvonne say? I didn't catch it.
She said she's not dead. Yvonne, go ahead and tell us. I think you had another comment. We won't deprive you of that, but tell us your answer.
Yeah, the reason I thought is because he said, well, I did see him, and he insisted on that, and he was right. He did see him. And but he was punished because he's lying. And I think that at the end, he was saying, I did see her. And that was exactly the same thing again. He did see her. Maybe the ambiguity is that we don't know. Maybe did he see her lying there and be dead or unconscious? But I think that it's the same line, that he did see him and he did see her.
Well, certainly one thing we know is after being forced to stand in the corner for 6 hours for saying that you saw someone, you probably are motivated to be honest, you know? And so it's I almost take it as like a punchline at the end, though, because the ending doesn't quite make sense if she's alive, but we definitely understand that the detective is kind of onto them. He basically is there present, overhearing the confession at the end. Yvonne, did you want to say something else though before we move on?
Actually, I did, and it's different. Well, throughout the movie, at times I was thinking that as that crazy young man was a little drunk, he wanted to get into the trunk. And also at other times, you know, if he were dead, really dead, there is a certain smell that is that they would smell, right? And they would become suspicious, maybe, that you would smell a dead body, but nobody ever smells anything. And then I heard the dogs barking at one time, and I said, that's it. The dogs are going to run towards the pool because they are smelling something. And that didn't happen either. So you could think that maybe he's not dead.
Yeah, well, you mean that maybe Vera should have realized earlier that she was being tricked? Is that what you mean by it? Or because of course he's definitely not dead. The idea is that they've kind of faked his death. Simone Signoret and the headmaster have faked his death so that they can scare Vera to death. She has a faint heart, and that's their plan all along.
Maybe that wasn't really it. It was more for us, the viewer, thinking that way, that, you know, there should have been something if he were dead.
There are a few things that seem to be definitely engineered less for the characters and surprising them, or, you know, scaring them, than, you know, for the audience experience. And I think, in answer to your comment about whether there be a smell, I think, I don't know a lot about corpses, but I think that would take longer if we're talking about like decomposing or something like that. But the equivalent that is very much present is, because he died in the water, he's drenched, and there's water kind of coming out of the basket as people are carrying it. There's water in the back of the truck. There's even the kind of funny joke where when they dismiss the drunk, you know, soldier, whatever he is, and someone interprets that as, did he pee in the back of the van when the 3 seconds he was sitting there?
So
you know,
wet there, yeah.
But that's, I think, you know, it's hard for a movie to deal with odors. That seems to be maybe the equivalent, you know, way of suggesting that there are obvious clues to outsiders that there's a corpse here. How do you get away with it? And again, that scene with the drunk guy is probably the best example of where we're so invested in the women getting away with it that, you know, we don't want them to be discovered. We want them to kind of get out of there before someone notices it. Thank you, Yvonne. Brigitte.
Hi. I was wondering if this movie could be a play, because the scene, I could see that in the theater. So that is one of
I
my,
wonder if it ever has been. It began as a novel, and
yeah,
the novel was adapted into the film. So Hitchcock also, many people, I keep obsessing with him, also sometimes look to theater. I think Rope is a good example of something that was a play that became like a movie in his case, but that obviously. But I think what you're saying is that maybe there are a limited enough number of locations and a small enough
exactly.
cast,
Yeah,
that I don't know
it
if
could
anyone's ever tried
definitely be a
it.
play. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
One thing
But
that's interesting about, yeah, go ahead.
no, I just want to make another point is
Yeah,
to go
please.
back to think she's alive. I do think the policeman is so much right there. He like her. So I think they combine together to make that two criminal to tell. And I think she faked her death. And the way also is so dramatic, the way she fell and everything, you can tell she doesn't really fail. She go by step. So you really, when I look at it, I forgot about this movie. So when I look at it, I say, oh, she fake. And one of your guests, I think it was Yvonne, say, I think she's alive. And I do think she's alive because the policeman was right there. So I think they worked together because he was suspicious and of it's happening exactly. I just wanted to
Yeah, no,
highlight that.
it's worth hearing a few more opinions about the ending. I have my own thoughts, but I don't want, to necessarily be the person who follows up every comment. So Leslie, if you want to share your thought, we'll hear from you and Larry before, and maybe some others.
Well, Brigitte stole my thought, which was, again, that the policeman was there, and if he cared at all about, preventing murders, which you would think a policeman would, then why did he come in after the fact when he could have come in earlier? And so I also sort of think she's alive, and that they have played on the play in a sense.
Interesting. I don't know if I agree, but I'm interested in this. I have my own theories, but I'm interested that what I'm most aware of is no one wants that character to die, and so it's very upsetting if the other outcome might be the case. Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that idea by Brigitte was just right on. I hadn't thought of it, but she had confessed. She confessed to the policeman already. And it's very possible that they had concocted this whole thing in order to generate a confession by the two guilty parties. And that would explain why she appeared to the same little boy again in the end of the show. My other theory is that they were getting ready for the Les Diaboliques 2.
They were getting ready for, say again?
They were getting ready for the sequel.
Right, part 2. Okay, I got it. That's funny. So my theory, does anyone else, because the ending's a rich thing to look at. I don't want to put a cork in the discussion of it if other people have thoughts. My theory is that thinking of films from the time period, I think it's very hard for the bad guys to get away with something in movies, certainly in American movies. Like there are two Billy Wilder movies in particular, Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard, where everything goes to the extreme. Like Joe Gillis is like floating face down in the pool of Sunset Boulevard, when the cops show up. So like, people don't get away with it, but they do it, if that makes sense. And Double Indemnity similarly, it's like the shots are fired before the police show up. And I feel like there's an aspect of that happening here. where there's the kind of satisfaction of the downer ending. Satisfaction, probably not the right word, but like, the thrill or the kind of what would have been a pretty uncommon outcome in movies of the time. And then you have the kind of coda that's almost like an afterthought and not entirely convincing, that comes in, like, doesn't let the bad guys get away with it. So that's how I tend to read this, because when he first shows up, not first, but like in that scene where the detective steps forward, I almost read it as like all three of them were in on it. Something like even the private detective or whatever. But instead it feels like, it feels like the way the movie is going to discipline the people for getting away with their thing. And the reason why I don't think there's a way that she can fake her death. I'm not sure if there's a reason why she would, unless it's to elicit the confession, and for like a good 5, almost 10 minutes leading up to it, she is being pretty directly, by which I mean, like, there's no pantomime, or she's not pretending. She's the victim of this charade. We see when you then kind of replay it, this is one of those movies when the outcome, the twist is known, you can go and watch it a second time and certain things make sense. You can see kind of how they are leading. There's a gaslight quality to this movie, right? They're leading Ingrid Bergman, Charles Boyer is leading Ingrid Bergman in Gaslight to believe she's insane. Here, they're leading this fragile woman. I'm not sure if such a woman exists in quite this way, but it's certainly not unusual for cinema at the time to have this kind of, woman who's always, what do you mean? Is that an example? To have a woman who's kind of always fainting, or kind of, maybe susceptible to like heart trouble or whatever we have here. But they're setting things up early on, and then of course here at the end we have, it must be Simone Signoret who's doing the typing, to make her think that there's a ghost. Like, she's falling for all of this stuff, right? So if there was some off-camera thing where she and the detective had figured it out, then what exactly, like, why is she going through the paces of letting herself be horrified or pretend to be horrified? I do think, I don't think Vera is a great actress, but there's something about the way that she like has that heart attack or whatever, that even though it doesn't look even remotely realistic, it's incredibly disturbing, right? Like, I've got her expression here, kind of just this kind of like the moment before where it's just kind of so I think that those last few, or it's not the last scene, but the moments in that scene, are meant to just kind of like imprint themselves on us. What it looks to be terrified on her face, and her, and how scary it is to just die of fright, essentially. And of course, the image that would send someone convincingly to having a heart attack. Sylvia, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that, that's possible because she was a weak person. I mean, she was she was married to an abuser. So, and she was the victim of an abuser. So, she's very she's easy to make her believe stuff, I think.
She's susceptible almost to their plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And to die. And besides, at one point they say that the money for the whole school is her money. So he's using her in different ways, and making her live in the same place with a lover. I mean, and even the lover, I mean, she's also allowing him to. It makes me think that, when I was a child, there was this woman in my school who was French, and from time to time, she was coming with the sunglasses, and everybody knew at the time, because I heard it at home, that she was being, you know, abused by her husband, and nobody was doing anything, I guess. It's, I think, I don't know if at that time things were seen in different ways.
They certainly were. I don't know exactly how, but like we've come a long way in a short amount of time, I think, culturally. And what's interesting about the history of cinema is that we have kind of a fossil record of some of these, you know, things to look at. And to the extent that sometimes you can look at movies from 5, 7 years ago and think, gosh, that feels like caveman times, like pre-Me Too times, or whatever it is, you know, like and sometimes it can be very cringy to watch, but also it can be very illuminating. You know, an example might be just like consent, or like, you know, the kind of thing where like in Hollywood movies and in French movies, the man would kind of like, you know, force a kiss upon the woman, and the woman would resist and then kind of wilt into, you know, like that's like nowhere in the world does that seem to be acceptable anymore. And yet that was the way it was being portrayed in movies for the longest time. Brigitte, go ahead.
Talking about this subject, I'm reading with some students L'Étranger d'Albert Camus, and on a number, I think chapter 3 or 4, they have this policeman coming to this apartment. The woman is being beaten, and the policeman just tell her, I say, go to your bedroom. And he just slapped the man because he doesn't talk to him properly. But then he says, say, don't make so much noise. Then the woman is telling her, say, this man is a proxenete and I need help. And then the policeman was like, you know, go to your bedroom. And so it's a time they didn't, I think it was that time we didn't quite make it to defend women against abuse or again. So the movie is also reflecting that. And Camus is also announcing that also, how, you know, we could abuse a woman, but that was not a fact. Making noise was actually, you call the police to making noise and bother your neighbor, but not beating your wife and not putting her as a prostitute. And that was not a case for the policeman. So it's interesting. I think it was Sylvia who talked about that. And because it's exactly the same time. And it was not quite important. It was not, you know, you would not arrest people for that. Slapping a woman, you were not arrested. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's I'm not as familiar with L'Étranger. It's been since college, so a few years ago that I read it. All I can really add, it's not even 2 cents. It's like 1 centime to that, is that our favorite director François Ozon has made a new adaptation of L'Étranger, and because he went, you know, I think you just saw it.
No,
oh,
I
great.
didn't saw it.
So
I follow. I live in New York, so I follow the news. No, I follow France Inter, and he was the guest in the morning to talk about his movie. So, and I was like, oh my God, I'm studying that with a student now. I have that in a movie. But
I have a feeling we will be revisiting that with him.
Yeah, I think it's nice to reread it before to see the movie. I will recommend it because the ambiance, the way Camus is writing, how much he explained, how hot is it, how is that time, that if he writes everything on a short sentence, everything is like 5 or 6 words, and he have a dot. So it's interesting to read it that way. So this is a book to read. I recommend it to read again.
And again, I think we'll all have a chance probably in the not too distant future when that movie reaches here. Carol has been adding a few smart things to our chat, and I just want to share a comment I'm going to read on her behalf. Carol, if you want to speak, you're welcome to as well. But she had written, death is often presented as an illusion. Another element that appears frequently in the film is mirrors, quite fitting for the theme of illusion. and that was volunteered a little bit back in our conversation, but it fits again here as we're kind of debating, I guess, whether who's alive, who's dead at the end of the film. And Clouzot is very precise as a filmmaker. It's one of the great satisfactions, I think, of watching the movie. And mirrors are always interesting in movies. They quite literally just give you another angle of something, but they cause you to question sometimes what you're seeing, and the reality versus illusion. I think that might be something that Carol was pointing out as a theme, and it's definitely underlying subject of this movie. What's real, what are we being led to believe, what is Vera being led to believe, and the way that, to go back to the kind of ending, that last bit with the schoolboy who's seen her, I then choose to interpret that this way, where it's kind of like a last chuckle or jibe or joke from the movie, which is that at first, when he says that about the headmaster, we are led to believe that he's seen a ghost, and we think that we're watching a ghost story, right? And in the end, we live in the real world. You never know with movies. Maybe it's possible that they're ghosts, but everything that's happened is real. What if that, at the very last joke, is the movie's way of saying that her ghost is now haunting the actual murderers, and maybe that's what the boy saw? Anyway, there's nothing empirical that could possibly satisfy or justify my reading, but that's kind of the way that I like to see it. Carol, would you like to say anything? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had some interesting thoughts here in the chat.
No, it's just I think this mirrors also the theme of the double a little bit. I think they are like two women, so it's interesting to think about that. And we always think about them as I don't know, one mirrors the other. So I was thinking about that, but it's really interesting. And about the Venezuela thing is interesting. Why didn't they choose Brazil or Portuguese? Or I have to see also in the book why, if the original character in the novel, right, if she's from Caracas or something like that. But it's interesting that she's rich, because in general, Latin American women are not portrayed as rich. So it's interesting that she has a lot of money. I thought this was really interesting about the narrative.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's funny, that was the question we began with that Alan brought up, and it definitely throws a weird curve into things, to have her be that way. And it might just be as simple as what you found, that the actress is, and so you have to kind of justify that. Yvonne, go ahead.
Yes, but I'm always in love with film noir, black and white. Those are my favorite ones. And what they could do, especially at the end and also in between, when you looked, what they did was light and dark a lot. And then when the house was dark, and they did a good job, and then suddenly the lights came on in all the different windows. And at the very end, when she was so scared, you saw it was pretty dark, and you saw those steps, and it was a little gray. So it was black, gray, and white. And then she looked through the light, the splits into the room, what she heard. Just the photography in all of the last scenes itself contributed so much by itself to that whole feel, to that whole, it's frozen. You sit there and you're just frozen.
Yeah, this kind of atmosphere, and there's quite a lot of darkness throughout the film, but especially in the end. And when we were talking about some of the compositions, the mirrors are a motif. These bodies of water, pool, bathtub, etc., are a motif. There's some really interesting scenes that are kind of divided, like in the middle, where you have almost like something in the background that kind of puts a line between them. Carol pointed out I think you used the word doubling, or like, when you have these two women, I think of movies like Mulholland Drive and Persona, where you have two women kind of conspiring. And in those movies, there's a blurring. I think that those ideas come later in art cinema, but like this is a movie that might anticipate some of those things, and movies always kind of build on one another. Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a film with more tension than this film, which is great. But Clouseau's other film, Wages of Fear, with that drive up the mountainside with a truck full of nitroglycerin, was perhaps even more so. Vera Clouzot is also in that film, and that's two of my very favorite films of all time.
I just read that someone interesting, let me see if I can see, it was like announced yesterday, is remaking Wages of Fear.
It's a good choice.
It's funny. Netflix is remaking it with Julien Leclerc. This was no, that was announced 2 years ago. That's not the latest. But of course, that movie was remade by William Friedkin. Gosh, I don't know. Well, watch for that. If you like Wages of Fear,
Okay.
There's someone interesting. I think it might have been the All Quiet on the Western Front director, but don't quote me on any of this. I just literally in the last day and a half, it kind of came up. Here's a fun fact I didn't know and that I found about this movie. I'm going to send this message into the chat. And so among, in the casting of this film, this is an image that you can look at and see if you recognize who this actor is. So they needed a school full of, of students, of boys. And so they found 120 actors, and, there was a big casting process for that. The first time the public ever saw Johnny Halliday was as an extra, one of the boys in the background of several scenes of this movie, which I did not know until just the last day, kind of doing some background research on this. But and the funny thing about this photo is it's totally him. You can see the the kind of the signature kind of squint and kind of that kind of Bob Dylan face that he has. But okay, we're going to kind of wind down here. Is there anyone who wants to kind of throw in a last thought before we set up again next month's movie? Going once, going twice. Ellen, did you want to say something? No, okay. I want to reiterate or kind of echo Justine's enthusiasm for this film next month, Suleiman's Story. It's a small film that premiered at Un Certain Regard, which is the sidebar at Cannes that isn't the main competition. Usually where less established directors show their movies. It won the Best Actor prize there. This, it's getting to the time of year when I, as a film critic, am putting together my top 10 list. I have it at very close to the top, in the top 5 films, maybe as high as number 2. I need to give it a second look, and, doing this next month will give me a chance. This is a movie that really hit me when I saw it. I can tell it's, I was compelled to see it when other people kind of, were having the same reaction. And I know some of you are doing this for the first time. Some of you, we can count on kind of being here every month, and we appreciate you kind of trusting us as we curate this. But take my word for it, whether you can make it or not, see Suleiman's Story. It's really a special film. Justine has just put the link into the chat. That's where you can find it. And I can't remember, Justine, can you confirm, because of Thanksgiving, are we still on the 4th Thursday, or did we move it to another? I keep saying that's the day of Thanksgiving. The 4th Monday of the month. Is that still the case for November?
That is a great question.
Okay, we're just going to confirm this before we wrap here, but I think it's that Monday,
it's either the
20...
24th or the 17th. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, be sure to, I guess what we should say is be sure when you're checking on this, we may or may not, with Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think it's Christmas that we moved earlier. I think Thanksgiving remains on that 4th Monday, but just double check the dates because we don't want to miss you. And it's a really great movie. So thank you all. I always love doing this so much that it wasn't a second's consideration to interrupt a Sao Paulo trip to join you guys. This is really a pleasure. And I hope to see you next month for our next installment.
Peter, it's the
Have
17th.
a good
Thank
rest of
you.
your day. The 17th. Okay, Renee
Thank you
confirms
very
it's on
much.
the third Monday of November. Okay, we'll see you then. Have a good one.
And you'll also be
Thank you
getting
very much.
you'll be getting an email from Alliance Française in the next few days with all the information, so you can find everything you need there. Thank you, everybody. And a special thanks, as always, to Melissa Sarah, Renee Ketchum, Isabelle Leroux with Alliance Française, and thank you to everybody who joined us today and for such an interesting conversation, as always. And in case you haven't had enough of Henri-Georges Clouzot, I put links to all of his films that are currently streaming in the US in the chat. And as Peter mentioned, also a link to the story of Suleiman. We'll see you back here next month. Looking forward to it. Take care.